Alright, picture this. You just got admitted to high school, and you're excited about what crazy new adventures you'll get to have as you make new friends, join a club, make greater strides towards your dream career in the next 3 to 4 years of your spectacular... Oh, well, congrats. You managed to get hit by a car and hospitalized for a week, you absolute fuck. My youth romantic comedy is wrong, as I expected. Better known as Oregairu, many of you are probably readily familiar with this hilarious rom-com already, better recognized by the many cute waifus and its comically narcissistic protagonist who somehow finds ulterior motives in everything and anything, and practically refuses to engage in social interactions. Or you don't know about it, because you're either a pleb, a zoomer, or just forgot about the show after watching way too much anime in your mom's basement while consuming copious amounts of Mountain Dew and Doritos. Hence why I'm making this video. Oregairu follows the events of Sobu High School's service club through the eyes of Hikigaya Hachiman, an extremely narcissistic, conceited loner who wants nothing to do with human relationships and pointless socializing due to his previous experiences. I don't know why you gave up so easily, my dude, but come on, you could at least pretend to give a fuck. Because of this, Hachiman's rather violent homeroom teacher, Hiratsuka, orders him to join the service club, designed for the purpose of fulfilling requests for individuals seeking help, which is where Hikigaya meets Yukino Shita Yukino, a cold, calculator girl who ends up clashing with Hachiman's weird, pessimistic remarks and makes fun of his dead fish eyes. Get absolutely rolled. And eventually, Yuigahama Yui, a happy-go-lucky girl who isn't particularly good at anything, yet enjoys bringing this unique charm to the club. And that's about it. Well, kinda. At the beginning stages of this rom-com, much of the focus is towards the efforts our main three put in as members of the service club, helping people like Zaimokuza Yoshiteru with his novel, in other words, Yukino murdering him over how bad it is, Yumiko Miura, who's kind of a cunt in the beginning, Totsuka Saika, by the way, that's a dude. I'm aware that he talks like a girl, looks like a girl, kinda acts like a girl, it's a dude. Deal with it. All that said, throughout season 1, we get to see that the main focus tends to be at the mercy of Hachiman's twisted worldview. Given that he's often been dismissed as creepy, weird, and insociable, he tends to dismiss human relationships completely, excluding the one he has with his sister, Komachi. So when he's forced to join a club that literally consists of people who are all dysfunctional in their own right, how is he supposed to respond to this? After all, Yukino doesn't really consider him a friend, and even Yui, who's probably the biggest klutz here, thinks of him as a little weird at times. All that said, what could possibly bring any change in any of these individuals, given how abnormal they are? Minor spoiler territory from here on out. You've been warned. Funnily enough, unbeknownst to the three of them, among all the funny, stupid moments they have together, they also know each other prior. After all, the reason Hachiman got into an accident was due to being hit by the car Yukino was in an effort to prevent Yui's dog from getting hurt. While this doesn't serve too much importance to the grand scheme of the show, along with all the wacky personalities that consistently tend to make their marks one way or another, it does surface a bit of tension initially, only for it to dissipate and serve as a convenient tool for the three to grow just a bit closer. But even among its comedic elements, our main three always end up distinguishing themselves in their own way, because despite some of the ridiculous situations they end up in, they are human. As such, they often make mistakes, reflect on their current relationships, and dismiss it as something in the past, moving on. Hachiman gets to be his cynical self, not really caring if Yukino or Yui enjoy his company or not. Yukino does her job as a member of the service club, not really caring what others will think of her afterwards, including her sister Haruno, who's more important later. Even if she kinda just takes over, fuck you Sagami, you lazy piece of shit. And Yui, being the happy-go-lucky person she is, gets to enjoy all these moments she spends with Yukino and Hachiman. Though, be it as it may, it's not exactly a smooth ride, as one would expect. Despite all the dumb shit that ends up happening, when it comes to helping others as part of their club, the main three of the service club, more importantly Yukino and Hachiman, tend to have to resort to some sort of questionable method to get their tasks done, despite what others may think of them afterwards. And while Hachiman doesn't really care for the end result, Yukino does often struggle with this, and is shown to have a soft side to her. Something Hachiman doesn't notice immediately. Though from an outside perspective, it all seems as the situation won't have any major issues, or take any major turns. They'll find a way that won't really affect them too much in hindsight, and there's nothing inherently wrong with letting them do things their way. Even if it takes a little extra effort, it won't affect those three too much, and it will always come back to that empty classroom. Then, everything changes. It's safe to say one couldn't help but forget everything that's happened throughout season 1, barely remembering even key aspects. I know, I just told you to disregard everything I've mentioned in the past 5 minutes. Fuck off, I will explain in a second. After all, how could you remember? Everything you think you know about these people is almost completely shattered within the first 3 episodes of Season 2, making Hachiman's real methods known and what really happens afterward. He doesn't just find an unorthodox method of resolving these dramatic issues, he makes himself a martyr in doing so, which quite blatantly affects him, and unbeknownst to him, it also affects Yui and Yukino. Why would that be important? It's simple. Aside from the new dynamic introduced alongside our beloved foxy idol figure Ishiki Iroha, and the fact that this lad had the idea of rejecting Hikigai not 1, not 2, but 7 fucking Anyway, aside from this new dynamic, the series reveals one key aspect about itself: keeping up fake appearances. See, during Season 1, we come to know the show as this typical rom-com high school drama with an interesting sarcastic dynamic from our main protagonists. In case you didn't catch that from the title the first time. However, between the more serious tone of the narrative, the upgraded art style that more accurately reflects the emotions of these people and what they're thinking, and the less prevalent comedy element of this so-called rom-com, we finally start to capture an inner glance of what these people are really like, along with their motives for doing so. While most people are familiar with Hachiman's cynicism, I ask this: how many of you have considered this a defense mechanism? The phrase, "youth is a lie," may just be a direct analogy at first glance, but thinking about what would lead to that way of thinking says something completely different. Being socially inept, having a sour look on his face all the time, and not necessarily going out of his way to have social interactions or to look cool, Hachiman was bullied and ridiculed early on, and his early experiences with women are depressing. Knowing that, I refuse to believe that someone would live their life in that fashion by choice. More specifically, Hachiman doesn't give himself a choice. He'd much rather stay a loner and find the highlights in it rather than stick his nose out and risk being hurt again, with his only saving grace being his little sister, Komachi, who at this point in time is the only person who sees him for who he truly is, and accepts him for it. She also enjoys playfully flirting with her brother way too much. Ironically, the same thing could be said about Yukino, who was effectively forced to live in the shadow of her older sister, Haruno, who was raised specifically towards the same end that Yukino herself strived for, something that becomes painfully apparent when her cold personality melts after the student council president dilemma. If her frozen smile told Hachiman anything from then on, it's that she's suffering. Yukino feels inferior to those she's associated with because she doesn't have a persona she could count as her own. She doesn't strive for the things she wants because she feels as if she doesn't deserve it. Or rather, she doesn't want to think about the personal risks presented from pursuing said goals. Not knowing how or if she can overcome any of this herself, there will always be one phrase I'll never be able to forget.
いつか私を助けてね。
Considering how Yukino and Hachiman's original dynamic could be summed up as constant bickering and making back and forth remarks, this came as a shock to me. After all, the fact that she opens up about her past during the scene and makes this request, this can only mean one thing. Despite all the disagreements and debates concerning how they both lived their lives, Yukino genuinely trusts Hachiman, and makes this request knowing that if and when she absolutely needs Hachiman's assistance, in a way that could drastically define her life going forward, he'll be there. But that's not the only significance of it. Why now, of all times, would Yukino tell him this? And that, my friends, is a little thing that gets talked about way too much concerning this show. While a lot of other details get glossed over, Hikigai's request for something genuine. Remember what I said about keeping up fake appearances? Well, this brings one other person into the light, and that person is none other than Yukinoshita Haruno, who could be considered the polar opposite of Yui. While Yui wants to do everything she can to preserve the life that she's come to enjoy since joining the service club, Haruno wants to shatter that reality, but not in the way you'd expect. Something you'll notice as the show goes on is that Haruno seems to know pretty much everything there is to know about those three. Their dynamic, their thought process, hell, even debunking exactly what Hachiman's motives are when it comes to Yui and Yukino. But that's not because she wants to destroy their group. Rather, she wants them to do something she can't really do. Something that she's been raised to do her entire life. She wants them to stop pretending. In her own way, Haruno cares about Yukino and the friend she's come to enjoy. So while her actions seem to be antagonistic, she plants the seeds of doubt and contemplation for the same reason that Hiratsuka is always giving Hachiman advice on how to handle certain scenarios that don't really make sense to him, and why she wants him to alter his way of thinking. They want to see those three grow, to strive for something that neither of them were able to achieve at their age. That something being the something genuine that Hachiman was seeking. That something genuine is such an anomaly that Haruno wonders if such a thing even exists. something that she brings up quite often after Hajimon mentions it, even in such a place as making cookies. Oh, yep, okay. Just pick it up. I wasn't done quite. I can't fucking do this shit! Now, there is one thing you may be thinking. You haven't really mentioned Yui too much. That's because her side can't be summed up by a mere monologue. It's not that simple. In fact, Yui may likely be one of the most deceptive of them all.
多分それが私たちの答えだと思う。それで私が勝ったら全部もらう。
There's something particularly special about Yui during this scene. Not just because of the atmosphere or the beautiful sunset cast behind her, but because Yui, of all people, is using the situation the three have been stuck in to her advantage. With Yukino unable to decide literally anything for herself in her current state, and Hajimon refraining from intervening too much, Yui takes this as an opportunity to achieve what's been her ultimate goal for months. To preserve everything the way it is, however, doing it in a way that pressures Yukino to give up her own wish in exchange for Yui's help out of her own crisis. That's when Hachimon and we realized something. Yui is a nice girl is something we believed wholeheartedly and chose to accept, not really questioning it. Yukino is a strong girl is an ideal we chose to preserve, not noticing the person inside the shell, something that can happen quite often in day-to-day life. We see the person for the persona they put on when they're in public and don't really think twice about who they really are, regardless if that's their true self or not. So when you find out someone isn't really who you think they are, do you choose to ignore it? Or do you acknowledge it and incorporate that moving forward? Or, as Hachimon puts it,
曖昧な答えとか慣れ合いの関係とかそういうのはいらない。それでもちゃんと考えて苦しんであがいて俺は
In other words, nothing about their relationship matters if none of it is real. If they don't be their true selves and still manage to keep things going that way, then what's the point? After all, that was the whole point of Hachimon's request. And so, with the current situation between the three put on hold, Yukino makes her request. With this, they'll continue to think, and suffer, and struggle, overcoming new obstacles until one day, they find the answer they've been looking for. But I mean, you know, there's also other things you can think about instead if that bores the shit out of you. Like Ishiki being an absolute meme, Hachimon being a tad sus for Totsuka, Hiratsuka being potential waifu material for the entire goddamn show, Kawasaki being a derp, Hayama being, well, Hayama. Hell, there's even this Giga Chad that literally binges a thesaurus every time he holds a student council meeting. His first sensible conversation with Hachimon is a fucking rap battle. But anyway, I'm not going to go too deep into Season 3 specifics, because I'd much rather you enjoy that for yourself, but I'll put it this way. They dropped the axe. Like, completely. If Season 2 was the focus switch about the fake images people throw up so people perceive them in a certain light, Season 3 is another forget everything you just took in moment, and finally starts to thoroughly address the one thing that pesky romance tag keeps you around for. Yep, the wrong tab. The love triangle. Finally getting into this makes this show even more special than it already was. You can't help but be invested in the drama, the constant contemplations, the internal struggling, because at the end of the day, at one point or another, these actions stop being driven by excessive amounts of logic and reasoning, and emotions start to influence even the most walled-off personas, even someone like Hachimon. A special motivation, a feeling, or even something that can't be described by mere words. After all, there always comes a point where you'll do something that won't make sense, that seems completely irrational, but you don't have regrets. Because whether the outcome is positive or negative, it's something that you genuinely wanted. It's safe to say, at least in my opinion, that these decisions are the ones that shape you into who you really are, and are what will lead you to what you want most in life. Of course, you'll have to see for yourself whether it's Yui's cheerfulness or Yukino's soft side that manages to reel in the strange phenomenon that is our main man, or whether it's him that has to take the long stride for all three to have their happy ending.
好きなの。あなたが好きよ、引きがやくん。
But for the love of God, if you haven't seen this show already, please go watch it. It's a wonderful show, and I hope something in this video has piqued your interest. As for those of you who have seen it already, go watch it anyway. But anyway, that's about it. So for those of you who have made it this far, I'd like to thank you so much for watching, as it's probably the longest I've ever spent on a single video project. So if you're here and you're not subbed already, why not? It takes 2 seconds and it helps me out quite a lot. One last thing, I do have a Discord where you can meet the resident absolute fuck in the area. I'm not kidding, that's actually his server role. So why not go say hi, liven things up a bit. I'll leave a link for that in the description below. Once again, thank you so much for sticking around, and I'll see you in the next one.